Okay, great. So I thought we'd talk a bit about context today, because everyone who's doing, you do these prompt engineering courses and, all of these seminars, and they're all talking about context. Context. You've got to give the AI context. And it's like, what is context? What context do I have to give? So I thought we could talk a bit about that, because I think it sort of depends what model you use and how your setup is. But context is basically all the information that the AI is taking into account, as well as what it has access to out there on the wider web. So if you see, if you're using ChatGPT, it's going out there and it's using its knowledge base, so what it was trained on, all of its data that it was trained on. But if you say to it, I am a co-founder of a tech company, I'm based in London, here are my goals, here's what I'm trying to achieve, here's a bit about my business. That is the context that's going to mean that what it's coming back with for you is going to be useful,
relevant to you.
Exactly. And that's going to vary really differently. And I think this is one of the kind of real sticking points for people in the beginning. If you don't give AI any context at all, surprise, surprise, it's going to come back with something really generic, really AI sounding, and it's not going to be helpful. So I think this context point is really key. And it's context in each prompt. So when I'm it's actually typing into the prompt, I am going to use what you're giving me, I'm going to use for a presentation tomorrow to this and this client. But also the context. So it's the context that it's working within a project area, within a GPT. So you can give it kind of permanent context. There's layers of context. If you use ChatGPT, there's the GPT material, which is like your wider context about your business, about you. You can be really smart with that. Or a Claude Project Area, again, you're giving it a special knowledge base. And then there's the context you give it in the prompt itself.
And I think one of the things that I heard, I think we did it from one of our training sessions, that someone said it's like briefing an agency. So it was for a communications team, but actually it was like, if you don't brief an agency or anyone, brief a co-worker, brief anyone with the right information, that they know what company that it is, where you're working, what your goals are, how they're going to achieve what you're going to do. And hang on, having been in a PR agency in the past, the better the brief, the better the outcome. So if you're given something very vague, which is like, we want to do some PR, well, I wouldn't have done a proposal for them, but that's effectively the same as if you're just going in and prompting and asking without any context. And that's what many people, they go in, they put that into their free ChatGPT that knows nothing about them, and they expect kind of like super level return that whatever they write is going to be like them. And then it's kind of like, I don't like the way that it writes. I don't think it can do my job. I don't think any of those things. And actually, it would be the same if you gave nothing to an intern or an agency or anyone else. If you didn't give them that information. And context, like many of these things, context prompting, they're all words that have been made up from the tech industry. And actually, it's not always terribly helpful. A prompt is a communication, effectively. A prompt is, how do you communicate in a way with your AI to ensure that it can understand what you're asking.
And I think that is it. If you think, I find it quite helpful to think of like new employees. So if you're getting someone new into your team, generally when you start a new job, you get like an initiation. Or some sort of orientation. So if you're a junior coming into a company, there's going to be a week there, or, a start, or you're going to get some sort of a starter pack that's going to say, this is what the company is about. This is what we're trying to do. These are our kind of key messages. This is our brand. These are our values. This is where this is our position in the market. So that kind of starter pack, you could think of as almost like how you set up your custom GPT or your Claude Project Area. That's like the present. So a new employee comes in, they get that basic set of information that means that, okay, I know where I am now. I know I'm in this kind of company. I'm going to get to know, in a bit more detail, but at least I have that basic foundational knowledge about what this company is trying to do. So I think if you think that way, what sort of orientation you might give a new employee, think of that information that you would be putting into your custom GPT or your Claude Project Area or your Gem if you're using Gemini. It's that basic foundational kind of stuff.
And that's what's so brilliant about Atheni, because we know it's a bit boring to keep having to repeat. And actually, you know, if you turn on the memory function within ChatGPT, it does remember a lot. And you can test that from time to time by asking it. I've done this I did this in front of a workshop the other day where I was like, who am I?
Dangerous.
And oh my God, so much stuff came out. And some stuff came out that I wasn't necessarily ready to share with a room full of people I didn't necessarily know, as it kind of projected above the screen. I was like, oh, it really does know me. And listen, you can be someone who hates that and thinks that that is an invasion of your privacy, and that's all, you know, and I get that too. But listen, I've spent time on social media. I know that, you know, my search history on Google ends up, I don't know, showing me something on an ad somewhere else or something. I don't know. But exactly. And I am comfortable with that. I am comfortable with that because I find that the level of usefulness that comes as a result of it knowing who I am, giving me the context, I'd have to repeat myself all the time. So that's really, and then with Atheni, I find how I use that, all the kind of pre-made prompts, which are brilliant because they really help me to just, they're like a launch pad for prompting. So I use it when I kind of, I'm doing something perhaps a bit different, and I go in and I'm like, I want to write, I don't know, some sort of plan for something. I can just put in a few bullets and then it knows all of me from behind. So I don't have to keep typing that all in. The bits that aren't as part of the bigger context, but the bits that are specific. Brilliant.
Yeah, and that specific context. So if we think of, like, if we go back to that kind of metaphor, like a new person coming on board and you've got your foundational knowledge about the company, about this kind of wider context. And that is somewhat kind of permanent, you know, like it's not really going to change a lot. It might change every 6 months or a year. You might update it, but really it's quite permanent. So that goes into your ChatGPT or into your Gem or into your Claude Project Area. But then you have each time. So if you imagine having an intern or a junior assistant with you, or a colleague even of any kind, if you were asking them to do something, you would give them a little bit of information. You wouldn't just say, here's a job, do your best. You know, you'd say, if you were saying to a junior,
waste of the time. Yeah, exactly.
I want you to draft a pitch for this new client that we're going to meet. I want you to draft the pitch for me. But you wouldn't just say that. You would say, here's a bit about the client. I've met them before. We have had conversations around this. Here's a bit of information about the stuff that we've talked about so far. Here's how I think we may be able to help them with these pain points. You know, the person who runs it has a history in this kind of industry. They're really sensitive to, you know, I don't know, overpricing, I don't know, whatever it is. But you would give them that context on the specific job that you're asking.
Absolutely.
So I think that is where we can equate that kind of work is in the actual prompt that you're giving in the moment. So if you think that foundational stuff being in your GPT, if you're going on to ChatGPT and opening a new chat, you're going to be needing to give it that same sort of context that you would be giving to your junior or your associate. You would need to be saying to it, this is a pitch that I'm going to present in 2 weeks' time. I want you to think through what those 10 slides are that are going to be really impactful, that are going to achieve this and this goal. I want you to be really clear that this is my goal coming out of it. I want to come across as XYZ. I want to win the contract. I want to. The more you can give in that moment, that is sort of the temporary context, because that context that you give it about this pitch is going to be different.
To the one you give to another one. Absolutely.
Different with a different client. So I think that kind of, and that's what, you know, obviously coming from Atheni as well, is that you are taking with you your context. So when you click through to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini from Atheni, it takes that context with you, and it basically saves you from typing out this stuff over and over and over again. But it makes sure the answer you're getting is super targeted to you and your particular goal and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and it's a launch pad, springboard, whatever we want to call it. But it isn't, you know, you're never going to get exactly what you want from only one prompt. And this is something that I think teams need to understand. Again, like, you know, just as if you spend a lot of time building a project area in order to be able to kind of get good work out of that, it's the same thing with general prompting, which is one prompt is the start. It's not the end. And one prompt starts you, and that's what we're trying to do with Atheni, is give people that first prompt that gets started, because if you can get started, that's when the creative juices start going. You're like, yep, this is brilliant, this is really helpful, but it isn't supposed to be an answer to every single person's, here's one prompt, oh, we've got the whole thing done. And I think this is all part of this human side that we talk a lot about as well, which is that these are different skills, that are required in prompting. They're not the same skills as are required in perhaps someone's job as a finance clerk, or as a corporate communications person, or as a legal assistant, or any of those things. Some of these skills are different skills. They're skills that they haven't had to, many of them have them naturally, but many of them are not being used on a regular basis, and they're certainly not necessarily being used in their jobs. So it is about a different way of approaching it. It isn't ever one and done. It isn't like, oh, I've now prompted, done the whole thing. Oh, it's all done in that amount of time. No, you're investing time in other places, but you're able to get more done often, or different level of quality done in a different type of way. And I think that's the message that is just not making its way out.
Isn't it? Yeah. And iterating quickly as well. So if you were dealing with an intern or a junior, you would tell them to go and put this pitch together, and they'd come back a week later, right, with a pitch imperfect, and you would send them on their way with a whole bunch of improvement points, and they'd come back with another iteration. So it's a similar sort of process, but we just have to get our heads around this idea of doing it quickly and iterating back and forth and saying, no, a bit more like that, a bit more like that. And I think just to get specific for the last couple of minutes, is we often talk about PICO prompting, so PICO. I think if you use Atheni, a lot of this is built into our prompts already, so you don't really need to think about it. But if you're using kind of naked AI, PICO can be a really good way to just think about things, which is P stands for persona. So what persona you want them to take, like be a harsh critic, be I don't know, an angel investor, be whatever, be one of my target
content, content. Give them someone 30 experience. I love giving them 30 years experience. 30 years experience as a finance director,
or creative director. So giving it the persona and saying behave like this. So I think P is that. I is instruction, so being really clear on instruction. And there was that funny thing about saying please and thank you, wasn't it? And you don't need to do that. But what you do need to do is be really clear on what you want it to do. So I write
your task
is, or what I'm looking at, you need to do this. So I is instruction, C is the context. So as we've talked about, the more information you can give it about what you're going to do with this stuff, what you're looking to achieve, the better the output's going to be. And then O is output. So do you want this information back in a 500-word article? Do you want 10 bullet points? Do you want a 3,000-word research paper with sources? So just being really specific about what output you want it to give back to you. And that kind of, I think, gets you started. I think if you're not sure where to start with the PICO method, and then you will see from there. But as you say, you need to understand that you've got to iterate back and forth. You're not going to get something perfect first time, and you just have to kind of get used to that idea of going back and forth, give a bit more context.
And I think that gives you a different way of thinking. So I find that some of that deep thought that I was required at the beginning of a project, I now have moved to slightly later on in the process, because a lot of that first stuff comes out that kind of gets the creative wheels thinking, and because it comes up with stuff that I perhaps wouldn't have come up with to start with. And that's what I find is really powerful, is that you're able to explore with different prompts, different perspectives. And with those different perspectives, you're able to give a more balanced view on certain things. And also you're able to kind of test things. So how is this going to be? A harsh critic is one of my favorites, particularly when it comes to some of the work that we're doing with our fundraising, which is kind of like, we want to know what's not working, and that way, it gives you that amount of information, because it does want to please you as well. And that also, people have to recognize that it is an innate built into these things, that if you want it to tell you that you're amazing, it will tell you that you're amazing. And it might talk an awful lot of rubbish in the course of it. So you have to recognize that this is a machine that is trained to do certain things. Some things it does brilliantly, some things it doesn't do so well. So always have that healthy critique, that healthy skepticism, that healthy kind of view on what do you want out of it. Do not accept that as read as the answer, because you know what, it might be wrong, it might not be the answer, and it might not, not be the answer that you need, even if you've done a brilliant prompt. So that level of kind of like always having that viewpoint of like, okay, that's interesting, and trusting your gut a little bit to like, I don't think that's right, and verifying it, which goes back to a conversation we've had before about different, using different LLMs, different AIs in order to start to verify some things as well. Trust that it's not always right, and do not send it off to someone if it's got facts or figures. I always get it to verify facts and figures through different sources to make sure, however good my prompt is.
No, exactly. We'll do another one on that, actually. I think bias and inaccuracies and hallucinations and stuff, that's often, people's understandably that's kind of worrisome. But I think there are some very simple things you can have in place for verifying these outputs and things as well. And again, it's one of those things that we just need to get used to in this world, right? There's a different step in our processes. It's about providing the context, it's about prompting, it's about iterating, and then it's also about having that step of verification and cross-checking across models as well. And that's just, that's how our work is.
That becomes part of your your toolkit, bag, skill set, backpack, whatever. That you just, that becomes baked into your job. You wouldn't do something without expecting that you got to check it. You know, and if you've saved 80% of your time in the first step, you've still got to spend a chunk of that in making sure that what is right. I mean, I had one conversation with a journalist once. It was quite amusing. He'd been sent something back from a PR agency, which was his bio, and it was completely inaccurate. It was wrote about a book that he hadn't written. This was probably 18 months ago now, when chat was definitely slightly, and it was so obviously someone had gone off just, and there is a danger that if you don't go through this process, which we will do something extra on verifying, that if you just accept what is written as correct, you may be creating the largest boo-boo. This then actually, he was like, this is embarrassing for the agency that they're sending me something that nobody has verified, nobody has checked. This is kind of rubbish. It's rubbish. But it would have taken 2 minutes of checking, verifying.
That's where, and this is probably another episode, is around, what is the difference between using AI and using it well? Using it right, using it correctly and logically and ethically. And these are two very,
very different. Exactly.
All right, let's leave it there for today.
Good. See you next time.